Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex, and I'm going to present my paper topic, which was looking at how gender expectations affect females, basically how the negative consequences of gender expectations or the hidden burden of being female. So I'm just going to show you my aids. It might be hard to see, but I attached the PowerPoint link if you can't see. So my topic, the burden of being female, or more specifically, the consequences of female gender expectations. So the first thing I looked at was a study done that basically proved that having more masculine traits, things like leadership, assertiveness, traits that you would typically think are masculine, whether you're male or female, having more of those traits was found to be more beneficial for your mental health. It was found that women who had more traditionally feminine characteristics struggled more with their mental health. After that, it kind of transitioned into the consequences of domestic inequality. So women who, whether they work or not, women who take on more of the domestic household work than their male significant other struggled more with their mental health issues. So basically, women who equally shared the work with their male counterpart, whether they work or not, were found to have better mental health than those with unequal domestic work divide. After that, I looked at a study that looked at women who chose to go after a traditional male career. So it looked at both traditional females going after traditionally female jobs, things like secretaries and education, and then it looked at non-traditional women who go after traditional male careers like lawyer or doctor or businesswoman. It also looked at their male peers going after the same career so that it could be comparable. Basically found that those women going after traditionally male jobs, although you would think that would be beneficial because those are better jobs and women are having more masculine traits when they do that, it actually found that they still struggle with their mental health. And not only with their mental health, but they struggle at work. They have more job tension and work stressful events happening to them. After that, it kind of transitioned into a different topic. Still kind of deals with gender expectations, and I'll tell you why in a second. But it looked more at the negative consequences of living in a culture that sexually objectifies the female body. So the first study, though, looked at kind of connected sexual objectification to gender expectations. It kind of showed how these sexual objectifications, whether it's an actual male that's like catcalling a woman, or whether it's a magazine that has a skinny woman in it that shows off just her body and barely her face, those sexual objectifications actually kind of instill in women, women internalize those sexual objectifications and will start to perceive certain gender expectations based on that. And then, the last thing that I looked at kind of supported that. It was a good example. It looked at the negative side effects of viewing sexual objectification. It looked at specifically superhero movies. So I don't know if you've ever seen a superhero movie, but the female characters are usually very sexually objectified. They have small waists and larger chests and hourglass shapes that seem unobtainable. So this study kind of showed how the way that their bodies are portrayed in those movies, not only the way their bodies are portrayed, but also how their characteristics are portrayed. Take the movie Spider-Man, for example. The female character Mary Jane is perceived as weak and in need of rescue, and she's also portrayed to be very sexually objectified. So these last two studies basically kind of proved, that when women view those images, they perceive certain gender expectations of what they should look like and how they should act, and it's negatively impacting their mental health. So visual aids, I thought this was kind of interesting. It kind of segments into my first interesting point. It says, "Hey Siri, are you a boy or girl?" She says, "I don't think that really matters." It's kind of funny, but my first point is basically that what I found interesting, I expected kind of to go in and find a lot about feminism and a lot about how gender really shouldn't matter, how gender should just be thrown aside because there should be equality between men and women. That's what I expected to find. But really, it was more about, recognizing that gender is there and what gender expectations we place because of being different, men and women being different, and then what those consequences are. It was less about, gender is just bad, 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 and more about what gender causes is bad. Not that gender is bad, not that gender shouldn't matter, but that gender is there and that gender has adverse side effects for men and women. I thought that was interesting. And then my next interesting point, not so interesting, but important. It was a big contradiction in my research. So the first one, I talked about some of these research studies already, but these are the stats. The major correlation I want to point out is in red. The other ones are important to my paper, but just for this point I'm making, look at the red ones. So it's basically showing that females, obviously, as you would think, showed less masculine traits than men. That's what the first one shows, that men have more masculinity than females. And then it's showing that at that same age, men have less depressive symptoms than women. So basically, the correlation kind of alludes that having more masculine traits leads to less depressive symptoms, and having more feminine traits leads to more depressive symptoms. And then here's the second study I kind of talked about. These are kind of all the stats, but basically it was just showing that doing more of the household work than your male counterpart, so having more domestic responsibility than your male counterpart, negatively impacted your health. So basically what the two studies, you would think, this is simple. They're saying have more masculine traits, don't do all the domestic work, have equality, basically what feminism alludes, what I expected to find. But this is the big contradiction. So moving to my my last visual aid here. This is the result of the last study, which was the big contradiction. This was a study that actually showed women going, see right here, it's the traditional women, the non-traditional, and the male, as far as career choice. This was showing women actually going after male careers, getting more masculine traits, having more equality, going after those roles that have those masculine traits like leadership, going after management roles and doctors and lawyers. But it's still showing that they have more bad negative side effects. So I thought that we were supposed to have more of that and our depressive symptoms would go down. No, it's showing that women still have more depression, more anxiety, more physical illness, more job tension, work events, and home events, which were like negative events, like deaths or the confrontation with a boss. Women that are supposed to be going above and beyond and getting those masculine traits are still struggling. So that was a big contradiction, right? So I just found that interesting. I think the last thing I'm supposed to talk about is what I learned, and I think the biggest thing that I learned is that that women need to pay attention to this. And I'm not saying go out and be a big major feminism or protest the superhero movie market. I'm saying just be aware, when you're choosing your spouse and you're talking about having kids, or if you're older and you do, have these conversations with your spouse or the person that you're going to marry. Figure out, the research says that we should have domestic equality for me to have better mental health. So I want that in a marriage, and I want that in a significant other. Just be aware, And then also, talk about these things with your future children or with your girlfriends, about how the sexual objectifications bother you. I've been catcalled at on the street, and I just always, sometimes it flattered me. I was like, oh, okay, cool, I must look good today. Or sometimes it was just oh, that guy was creepy, and I let it go. But do we really think about how these things mentally, really affect our mental health? Or, I've viewed tons of superhero movies and I've looked at tons of magazines, and I want to say, I'm not impacted. That doesn't affect my mental health. It doesn't affect how I feel about the type of woman I should be or the gender expectations I have for myself, but they do. So think about that, talk about it, just be aware. That's the biggest thing that I think I've learned is that women need to be aware of these things. There are consequences of being female and the expectations put on us just because of our gender. So just I think that it's important to be aware. And that's it. So y'all have a good evening.